Alright, so today we are filming Theo Lipfert, MSU professor in the film department. And Theo, how long have you been a film teacher up at MSU?
So I've been there for about 10 years. I started in 2003, so actually 11 years.
Oh, cool. And how did you first get the job there?
They do an international search for each of the positions that are open, and I applied for the job and was interviewed and went through a lengthy process and luckily got hired.
Cool. Did you still live in Bozeman before that, or did you?
We did actually, yeah. We had moved here for my wife's job at MSU, and then luckily a position opened up in the film department.
Cool. And how long have you been doing film stuff in general?
You know, I've been working in film video for about 20 years. Yeah, maybe a little bit longer than that.
About 20 years. So you studied film in college?
I actually didn't. I studied painting in college, so I was a fine arts student, and then I switched over to making videos. I worked as a painter for a while, and I showed my work in New York and in Cologne, Germany. And then in the early 90s, I started to work in early forms of digital video and really got hooked, and then stopped painting and just really concentrated on film video projects.
Okay, so how did you first get started with video projects then?
Right. So the first big project I worked on was a collaboration with a friend of mine in Germany, and we were working on basically a live projected video for classical music. So there was a orchestra that was playing a classical music piece, and we had made a video, it was about half an hour long, that projected above the orchestra when they were playing. And we showed it at a couple of museums in Germany, and basically it traveled around a little bit, and then it showed in Rockefeller Center in New York as well. And after that piece, I was so hooked on it because I really liked the kind of public performance aspect, very different than painting. You know, with fine arts, it's more like you work for a year or two and you put your work in a gallery and people come and look at it, and that's all nice. But with film video, you have people in an audience, and if you're doing a good job, they're really glued to their seats, and they're much more engaged than, for instance, in a gallery setting where people are looking at paintings. They tend not to be as engaged as if they're watching a video.
So Theo, you do a lot of documentaries.
I do.
For MSU projects and stuff like that. And why documentaries? Why do you like to focus on documentary film?
You know, the thing about documentaries is they're narrative or documentary, it's all stories. The interesting thing about documentaries is that they're true, or hopefully they're true. And there's something compelling, I think, about telling true stories to people. I think people can connect with them. I think there's a lot of creativity that you can bring to the documentary. I think it's a very open form. You know, in the last, say, 20 years, there's been a lot of experimentation with documentary, so it's not the same old science film that you used to see 20 or 30 years ago. Now there's all kinds of creative approaches to making documentaries, and to including things like recreations and animation, and it's really wide open right now. So even though people might think of documentary as being kind of a stodgy old form, it's actually a place where there's tremendous amounts of innovation, and so that's one of the big appeals for me.
Yeah, one of my favorite types of documentaries is behind the scenes stuff for movies.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the other. The audience has gotten really sophisticated watching documentaries, right? So even bad things like reality television has encouraged the audience to really think about how things are portrayed and how truthful stories are told. So I think it's kind of a fertile ground right now for people to experiment with.
So yeah, filming documentaries is a very diverse film genre. What do you think is probably one of the hardest obstacles in trying to film a documentary as opposed to other film projects?
You know, I think the hardest thing right now is that there's so many good documentaries out there that in order for a documentary to really sort of push through and connect with people, it has to be so spectacular. You know, it has to be something that's really life or death, and really you can't really tell small stories anymore, right? So things have to be kind of kind of big to make it as a documentary.
And then also from like a technical aspect, what do you think are some like challenges in like technically speaking when filming a documentary?
Sound is one, that's for sure. So, one of the not easy, but one of the more accessible things right now is the actual image, right? Because people have GoPros and they have cell phones and they have all kinds of ways of capturing the image. Yeah. So there's a huge variety of, it's not unusual now to see a documentary where they have, they've got 5 cameras mounted on the front of a car, they've got, any number of ways of recording the image. But for the audio, that's always a tough thing. You always have to have a microphone close to the person you're recording. And if they're part of the story, then they can be wearing a hidden lavalier mic. But if they're not, if you're shooting more run and gun style, where you're basically following real people in real situations, the audio is really that's a tough nut to crack.
So keeping with talking about audio, how important do you believe audio is in like any type of film?
Audio is it's half the picture. I mean, it's so much more important than people think. If you watch videos that aren't really working, that aren't connecting with people, it's often not the image, it's the sound, right? The sound sounds very far away, it sounds broken up, or there's technical issues or whatever. People connect with hearing things. If you see somebody's lips moving in a movie, you have to hear what they're saying. It doesn't matter if it's plausible or not. You could be shooting across 5 lanes of traffic, but if you see 2 people walking and talking, the audience wants to hear what they say. So it's absolutely crucial. It's the thing that a lot of people get wrong. They don't understand how important sound is, and they think, oh, it's all about the picture. We'll get this really cool shot, and we'll do these cool camera moves, and we'll do all this badass stuff. But if the sound isn't working, the movie doesn't work. It's absolutely crucial.
So, what are some tips you'd say that you would give to a film student who wants to learn more about how to make sure that they have good audio?
Right. So the number one thing is to get the microphone close. You get the microphone as close as you possibly can to the person who's talking. Eliminating, listening to a room, right? So this room is a little bit echoey, so you'll hear probably in my voice a little bit of the sound of the room.
And that's just because this is
it's
type of project.
Right, exactly. The microphone close. Just paying attention to sound. I mean, it's important to plan for it and to think about it as you're setting up your interviews or your whatever you're filming, to really go, not only look that there's a cool background, but that there's not a highway right behind you, that it looks good, but also that the acoustics are good in the room. So it's mostly just being aware of it that really helps. So if people think about sound, then it's not that hard to get good sound. You just have to know to get it. You have to care to set things up correctly.
So going back to the topic of documentaries, what would you say is the most important thing to remember when you're filming a documentary? What's the most important thing to focus on?
Story. Story is the key part of documentary, and you don't typically think of that. You think, well, documentary is about a topic or an issue or something like that, but it's still a story. You want to connect with the issue or with characters or people who are involved in whatever the film is about. And it's ultimately, we're storytellers. That's what we're used to, since the time of cavemen. We sat around and told each other stories. And especially with documentary, that's how you connect with something. That's how you connect with a topic, is to identify with people who are experiencing something.
All right. And for other film things, obviously they write the story beforehand, and there's storyboarding and scripting. But you can't really do that in documentary. So how does the storytelling and the organization go for a documentary, since you can't just write up the screenplay first and then make a bunch of storyboards?
Yeah, so with the documentary, I mean, what you're doing as a filmmaker is you're keeping yourself open to discovering stories. So you'll have, whatever the topic is, you'll find some compelling people that can talk to you about that topic. You'll find some people who are the decision makers or whatever. They'll have some connection to it. And then as a filmmaker, you're just always listening to connect to some kind of story element. And from there, you almost write it in reverse, right? You film it first, and then you listen for what people are saying. And when there's something that's like a hook or something that's compelling, you start to say, well, that's a part that that's an angle that I'm going to take. And then you might try to find other people that can talk about that same angle. And you almost like build it backwards. You know, you don't write it first and film it, you film it and then you write it.
So Theo, how many documentaries have you actually filmed throughout your...
I've done, probably around 10 or so, depending on, some were real short. So, and I did one feature-length film. I just finished working on an hour-long film about Montana Shakespeare in the Parks. It wasn't my film. I was the post-production supervisor.
Oh, cool.
I shot some of it, and I did some audio for it. But I was basically kind of the head of the editing crew, so I was basically supervising that. And then I've worked on my own projects that have shown at festivals and have been on Montana PBS and some other PBS networks.
What kind of topics have those been about?
Lots of different stuff. So I did a film on a group that does statistical analysis of human rights data. So I actually traveled all over the world interviewing people in various post-conflict societies where there had been a big human rights issue. I did a film before that on Korean comfort women, who are these women who are now in their 80s, who were, when they were teenagers, they had been abducted by the Japanese army during World War II. I've done films about some internet legal issues, some other stuff also, some local things, some Montana-based projects as well.
Cool. And do you ever get in front of the camera at all for any of these types of things, or are you mostly...
No, I rarely. I mean, sometimes we'll shoot a little behind-the-scenes thing where we'll interview, each other basically about the production kind of, behind-the-scenes footage. But no, I don't usually appear. Sometimes I'm in like the corner of a shot someplace and nobody else knows it, but I know it, but it's just because of one thing or another. I'll just end up being sort of in the side of something or behind something, or my voice will be there or my shadow will be there, something like that. But no, I don't. Little things, exactly, little cameo appearances. But no, I don't ever I usually don't include myself in the film.
Yeah. So then, a few years back, you and your whole family moved to Mauritius for a while to film a documentary down in Mauritius. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? Sure.
So we spent 10 months on the island of Mauritius, which is off the coast of Madagascar, between Madagascar and India, basically in the middle of nowhere. And I was on a Fulbright grant, and so I taught at the University of Mauritius. I was teaching filmmaking there. And one of the interesting things about Mauritius is they have giant tortoises, which are very similar to the ones that you'd find in the Galapagos. They're these enormous tortoises, thousands of pounds. And I made a film about the restoration of the tortoise population, basically some environmental work that was being done to help bring a tortoise population back to health. And so I worked on that during the 10 months that we lived there.
So most of the documentaries you've done you can find online, right?
They're mostly online. They show, sometimes I'm doing things for broadcast, so they'll be on, like for instance, Montana PBS. Some of my films are distributed by an educational distributor, so people use them in classrooms and so on. And then I usually have, like on my own website, I'll have copies of most of the stuff that I've made.
So what's your website like?
It's just my name,
to find, like, just look up a bunch of videos that you've done, where would they look?
So it's theolipfert.com, and if you just go there, there's about 10 or 12 of my films.
All right, sweet. I just gave you a plug.
I know, right? Exactly, right?
Yeah. So as a man of film, a student of film, what would you say are some of your, what filmmakers do you say you draw a lot of inspiration from? Who are some of the filmmakers who have inspired you over the years?
I think one of the filmmakers is a documentarian named Errol Morris, and he's made a lot of films. He's an interesting guy because he makes his living doing television commercials, and he did a lot of Apple commercials and Nike commercials, like really high level, very slick, cool stuff. And he makes enough money from that it funds his documentaries, and his documentaries are much more political, and they're really interesting films, but their documentaries in general are not money makers, with the exception of Fahrenheit 9/11. Documentaries are lucky if they break even. They're just not. They just don't do well financially. But Errol Morris made a film called Standard Operating Procedure, which is about the soldiers in Iraq who were using their cell phones and their cameras to photograph the Iraqi detainees, and those were the famous photographs where the guys were being bitten by dogs and they were standing on a crate and so on, and they were very shocking photographs. And he basically did a feature-length documentary about the soldiers that took those photographs and what happened to them and what their stories were, and it was really compelling. I mean, it was so much more in depth than the news. The news reporting was like, this is shocking, these soldiers tortured these people and photographed it, and the real story was much more complicated than that. Errol Morris, to me, his documentaries, they're on important topics and they're really creatively done. Like, they're beautifully shot, they're beautifully filmed, the sound design is really good. They're really first-rate, top-notch films on every level.
So like we've said before, you mostly work with documentary. Have you done any videos that weren't documentary type film? Talk about that.
Yeah, so I've done a number of projects where I collaborate with composers, with musical composers, or I'm creating the soundtracks myself, and these projects are live projections, so the video is projected, and sometimes I'm able to manipulate the video or make certain editing decisions in real time, like while it's playing. And with some of them, there's accompanying music that's live, performed on stage. So they're much more like concerts. They're more like a musical concert with video than they are like a film. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of projects like that, and I really like. I mean, it's a very different kind of thing. I mean, it's a unique one-time performance. So it's very different than like a documentary that you would see on television. I just did a film in Germany that was based on a short story that was written by Thomas Mann, who wrote The Magic Mountain and Dr. Faustus. And we had music students improvising live music while the film was projected. And it went over really well. I mean, it was a really fun project to do.
Cool. So what other types of film genres do you really enjoy?
I like almost all kinds of film. I like Hollywood films, I like independent films, I like experimental films, I like music videos. I mean, basically, if it's well done, I'm gonna like it. It's stuff that's bad quality that I don't find particularly enjoyable. But even blockbuster movies are, the level of craftsmanship is unbelievable, and so there's even, it's rare that there's a film that I'll watch that I can't get something out of, even if I don't really connect so much with superhero kind of movies and summer blockbuster kind of stuff. But on a technical level, I mean, those aren't the stories that I'm that interested in, but on a technical level, I'm watching some of that stuff, and it's mind-blowing, the kind of level of craftsmanship that you see in a big Hollywood production.
Yeah. So besides documentaries, what's another type of film that you might have always wanted to maybe try to do, or you might try to do in the future? Have you ever thought about any other type of film genres that you'd like to try doing sometimes besides a documentary? Right.
So I write scripts also, and I would ultimately love to direct something that I've written. So I'm working on a couple of feature-length screenplay ideas.
Oh, cool.
And that's just that's a very different world, right? You have to get financing, and it's a 1 in a million chance to get something actually produced. But so there's really two things. I mean, on a smaller scale, there's films that you can make yourself with self-funding or with a grant or something like that, and they're much smaller budget and so on. But you can make them, you can do them and get them out and show them to an audience, and people can respond, and that's all wonderful. And then there's bigger projects that you really need some kind of studio backing, or you need a lot of money and resources and people to produce. So for those, it's more like coming up with the idea and then trying to get somebody to fund it. And on the smaller scale, it's things that I can do everything myself. I can write it, I can shoot it, I can direct it, I can edit, I can do the sound. And they're really both fun. I mean, everything to do with film is fun. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's it's a wonderful popular art form that really connects with people and has for 100 years.
So what kind of scripts have you written? Like,
so I'm writing, I've written things that are basically kind of comedy dramas, and I have a couple of things that are, I have a script that I've just finished now that's basically a road movie, it's a journey across America kind of thing. So
a road trip type thing.
Exactly. And, they get sent to festivals and other things, and sometimes they do readings of them and so on. So, they're a little more traditional films than the kind of projects that I'm usually making.
Mm-hmm. So if you guys got the opportunity to do like a bigger budget type of movie, what type of genre would you want to do, and like would you take that type of opportunity? Like if some studio was like, hey, we've got a script for like a murder mystery thriller thing, and we want you to direct it, would you take that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's mostly drama that I connect with, right? So I enjoy. The one thing that I don't really connect with is romantic comedy. I mean, I enjoy them, and I appreciate how they're crafted and so on. But for me, I really like dramas that have a kind of, they might be funny, but they have a kind of serious point behind them. They connect with some deep emotion or with some real issue or something. And even something like one of my favorite movies is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is very sort of surreal, but it really connects with an emotional thing of splitting up with somebody, with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and wanting to just erase the memory of that person. Something that everybody goes through at some point. And the film is so clever in how it deals with that topic. It's not sentimental. It's not overly sweet. It's science fiction-y, and it's dark.
That's the one with Jim Carrey, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's with Jim Carrey in it, who is so good in that film. He makes a lot of big dumb movies, but every once in a while he does one of these smaller independent projects, and he's great. He's a really good actor.
Yeah, no, Jim Carrey's the type of guy that I feel like if he did more serious roles, he could get an Oscar like that.
Yeah, he's very talented, and he, he's not going to turn down the next big rubber-faced movie, right? Why would you? But
it's the same thing with like Adam Sandler. I feel like if he
Punch
did
Drunk
more
Love
drama,
is like,
exactly.
That's a great movie, absolutely.
But then he keeps on doing all.
Then he's going to do the Waterboy 6, right,
Yeah.
or some terrible thing,
or just like another Grown Ups or whatever,
right.
where he likes to do these romantic comedies
right.
with
Drew Barrymore,
which I don't understand.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So drama and I like films that connect with people. Connect on some kind of emotional or political level.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
Sure.
talking with me.
My pleasure, Arlen.
Yes.